What's up Flutter aliens, welcome back to another video of Flutter and Firebase Developer Bootcamp's week 5. In this first video of call feature, we will implement the domain and data layer both together, which this time is not going to be that hard as it was before when we were working in the user feature, right? Anyways, let's get started implementing the call feature with its domain layer, and then we'll go for the data layer. So we have implemented the user, status and the chat feature, and this is going to be the last feature we will be working with in our WhatsApp clone clean architecture. So first we have to create directories inside. That would be obviously the domain and then the data and then their subdirectories. So we will start from the entities. Here we will create an entity that would be call entity. Inside that call entity, inside that we are going to have the call entity extending the equatable for the value equality. Then we have the fields of the call ID, which would be the unique identifier of naming the channel in the Agora SDK, where two users will be connected will have a unique name, so that call ID will be used here. And then we have same as the chat feature, when there were two users chatting, the caller ID, caller name and caller profile, same as we had the sender ID, recipient ID and recipient profile URL and all of that stuff. So we have the same thing also in here. And this is called dial and is missed fields is going to be used to identify if the call has been dialed for other user and if he received it or directly missed that call. So these two fields is going to help us in the UI so that we can build the call history page and will showcase if this call has been made to the other user or received and is missed. So this is merely for this purpose. And then we have the created add field, which is obvious from its name whenever that specific call has been made to other user or received. That's it, passing them in the constructor and in the list of object properties for value equality. Then we are going to go ahead and implement the repository for the call feature. So we're going to have a call repository in the repository directory of the domain layer, and then we're going to have a contract or an abstract class which is going to hold all the main use cases of the call feature. The first use case is going to be make call, so that we can make call to the other user and our two instances will be created on the two users ID in the database in the call collection, and they will remain in there until the call has been ended. So it will become more clear to you when you go forward and implement them and go for binding back them with the UI. So along with that, we'll also keep an eye on the Firebase file store to show you how the instances are created and how we are making call and ending call and how we are using Agora SDK in that, so that two users are connected in that channel and chatting with each other in the video call. Anyways, then we have the save call history, which will be called after the make call and end call to save the history, and is user calling is going to be the method to get if the user is calling to the other user. So this will give us some data in the stream, and based on that we will display some different UI of pickup call page. It will become more clear to you when you go forward and create that simple page of pickup call page when user receive one. Anyways, we have one more game my call. This is going to be the get, and this is the get my call history, so that we can get my call history in the call history page. And the get call channel ID is to verify if both users are still chatting or not. Just future string method which will return us the channel ID of that specific call that we have created the instance in the database, so that we can verify if the call is still ongoing from the current user side, which means in simple words already exists or not, so that based on that we can take decision to end the call or whatever is going to be the decision we will be making in the UI. So that is simply get call channel ID, and then we are going to go ahead and create the individual use case classes for the call repository, which will be depending upon the call repository. And let's go ahead, and here we got the individual use cases of our call feature. So they are the same use cases as we had in the previous features. For example, int call is a class which depends upon the repository and having a call method for making it a callable class and then returning the int call method like that, as simple as that. Then once we have this data in the domain layer, with that our domain layer is successfully implemented. Then we are going to go ahead and first thing first, we have to implement the repository, but the implementation of the repository is going to depend upon the remote data source. So we have to first create the remote data source, but will be also call remote data source, and then it's going to have one more file call remote data source implementation, and then the call repository implementation. Also one more file call model for some external third-party conversions in the model. So we will copy the call repository and paste it in the remote data source call, and we'll change its name to call remote data source. And here we're going to have a class of call repository implementation. Will be implementing the call repository and is going to override the missing methods, and is going to depend upon the final call remote data source, pass it in the constructor and make it required, and then is going to call the methods like asynchronous and the arrow function, remote data source dot int call, and the same for others. So once we have the call repository implemented, we have to implement the call model, and that would be simple call model extending the call entity and passing the parameters to the super constructor. And we have the from snapshot method to convert data from snapshot to dot objects, and also to document, or it can also be to JSON, to convert the data to some raw format so that we can store it in our cloud Firestore database. So that is a simple model. Now it's time to go and create the class remote data source implementation. Will be of call remote data source implementation. Will implement the remote data source of call. Here we go, and we have to remove this suffix remote from here, call remote data source, and open the body for that. Once we have this, we'll create 6 missing overrides, and obviously this is again going to depend upon the final Firebase Firestore, and will be Firestore, passing it to the constructor. And here in the remote data source implementation, we will just creating the instances of the call and deleting the instances, getting the ID, getting the call history, and getting if the user is calling. So these instances will be only created in the Firebase so that we can based on that show different UI, but actually the call is not going to made from the Firebase. These will be just the instances will be made for some time and will be deleted, and the call history will be saved, but the actual call will be made from the Agora SDK that we will be using when we go ahead and start binding that logic back to the UI. So there we will initialize the Agora SDK in the UI, and we'll passing the app certificate and app IDs like that, and then we have to generate a token in some other server, which will be the token server called, and like that a channel will be created for the 2 users, where 2 users will join that specific channel and the call will be connected, and we will see different UI of the call coming from the package that we have added, that is Agora UI kit. This gives us the inbuilt UI of the video calling, so that we will be using this when we go ahead for binding the logic to the UI. And why we are writing the Firebase code and how this is going to be used, it will also become clear to you when you go forward and again binding that logic to the UI. So let's get started implementing the int call method. It will be asynchronous since it's feature void, and this body is going to be very simple. That would be first accessing to the collection reference of the call directly will be a global collection, not inside any collection to become a sub collection, but will be a global collection, will be directly stored as we have the status and the user. And then on the caller ID and the receiver ID, we will delete the instances of the call. So here we directly implement the int call method, so it might be a bit confusing for you that how is call is created and how we are going to delete it. So now let's go ahead and implement the make call, so this will become clear to you how we are making call and then we are deleting it. So it might have been cleared for you a bit since we are deleting the call instances on the caller ID and the receiver ID, which means that it will also be created on that. So it's obvious from here, and then in the make call we will make it asynchronous, and then it's obvious we have to access to the collection reference, and then down here we have to take the randomly generated ID by the Firebase, which is going to be our channel name in the Agora calling SDK, and then the same two instances of the caller data and the receiver data as we had for add to my chat method. For example, let's go ahead to the chat. In the data, in the remote data source implementation, when you are calling the add to my chat, here add to chat, you can see we have the new chat and the other new chat. So here the sender remain the sender and the recipient will remain the recipient, but here the sender will become the recipient and the recipient will become the sender. Same like this we have while creating the call instances for two of the users that will be connected in a call with each other. We are doing caller name will be the caller name for the caller data, and the receiver data, the caller will be the receiver, and that's it. As simple as that. Then we have to call the methods after that. That would be this: first put the try catch block if some exception occur, and then from the collection doc on the caller ID we will set the caller data, and on the receiver ID we will set the receiver data. So two instances will be created one at a time in the Firebase Firestore database when a call is made, and based on that we will get if the user is calling, and then we will join the call on the unique ID that we have here using the Agora SDK, and the further process you will get to know about that when you go forward for binding that logic to the UI. So this is a simple method for making the call, just creating two instances in the Cloud Firestore database, one of the user, the current user, and the other user that this user is made a call to. So the call method, make call method, is going to be like that, and the get user calling is going to be first access to the call collection reference, and then we'll return the call collection where the caller ID is equal to the UID, which means that taking the instance of our call which has been made when the make call was called. So we are simply taking that instance, and on the UI we will take the decision if the call is incoming or ongoing. So for the current user that is making call to the other user, for the current user it will not be the case of incoming call, because he may have the is call dial true and the other user is call dial false, which means that he is receiving the call and he made that call. So where the is call dial will be false, we will show the incoming call for that user in the chat page. So it will become more clear to you when you go forward for binding that in the UI, and we'll show you how the incoming call for both of the user is going to take place when one user make call to the other, and how the incoming call page will appear for the other user. So this method is simply for that purpose, to get if the user is calling. So that's it. Now we're going to go ahead and implement the remaining methods. Let's set a save call history. We will make it asynchronous, and then in the body of that, first we have to access to the collection of the call history. That would be my history collection and other history collection. For example, when we make a call, the history of the call will be saved to both of the users that is going to be connected in the call channel of the Agora, and if other decline the call, So that is missed field which we have in the call entity will become true. So based on that, we will display some different UI. And if it's not, then we will simply show the call has been received, and we'll have a green arrow like that if the call has been received and he picked that up. So this is how the scenario is going to be. We will create two collections inside the caller and receiver ID, which means that the current user and the other user, and then inside that there would be the collection of the call history, and then the call data, passing the data from the call entity. When we are saving the call history, we will take the data from the call entity, so that would be directly called with the make call. So the data we're passing to the make call model, so that will become also in here, and we will set them on the call ID and call ID that is already within the call that has been made, and we will set the data, the call data and call data. And the set options merge true means that when you hover this merge, it's saying changes the behavior of the set, which means that it totally changed the behavior of this set method. And what it does is replace the value specified in its data argument, which means that the only data specified in the values in here will be modified or changed, but the others will remain untouched. So this is how the save call history method is going to be. And then we have only two methods remaining, that are get my call history and then the get call channel ID. So the get my call history is going to be not asynchronous, but we will simply have a get method in here of snapshots, since it's stream list of call entity. So that is going to be very simple. We have my history collection in the user collection, inside that user ID, which means that get my history, so that UID will be the current user ID, and inside one more collection that will be the call history, and the create id at will be true, which means that will give us in the descending order then the my history collection snapshot, mapping each snapshot for that collection, retrieve for the UID inside the call collection, inside the call history collection, and map each query snapshot and access the documents from the query snapshots and map them again. Once we got the query document snapshot of map string dynamic, we will convert it to the Dart objects by doing call model.from snapshot and passing that e in here, and lastly doing to list, so that it's returning the stream list of call entity, and then we will listen to the stream and will pass the data from here to the loaded state of the call, and then from there we will retrieve it in our UI. So that's how the process is going to be. This is future get call channel ID. We'll make it first asynchronous, and then first accessing to the call collection reference, and then on the call collection on that UID of the current user, or it can also be the recipient user, like when a call has been made in here. So based on the caller ID and the receiver ID, which is the current user and the other user, will be connected in a one call channel having the same call ID in here in their instances, which means that the same channel. And then up here on that UID we will get that document, and then it will give us the document snapshot of map string dynamic, and from that query and from that document snapshot of map string dynamic we will access the data, which is the map string dynamic containing all the data of the document snapshot as map, and we will access it the call ID. If it exists, then we will return the call ID, otherwise the future value of empty string, and that's it. So that was the remote data source implementation of the call feature. We have ended the call in here and get the channel ID of the call to see if that specific channel already exists or not, and get my call history to get my call history in that call history page, and get user calling to check if the user is calling or not, and make call to make two instances of the two users that will be connected in one single channel, and save call history, and that's it. And these Firebase methods is just to populate the UI, and the actual calling will happen in the Agora, and we will be writing one token generator also in here, because Agora support the token authentication for the users that will be connected in the channel for calling. So it will become more clear to you, and I will explain it in more detail when you go for binding that logic in the UI. So that is what is going to happen when you finally go for binding the logic in the UI while creating the qubits and injection container and all of that stuff. So that's it for this video. If you found this video helpful, thumbs up a like and subscribe for daily updates. Also, drop down all of your confusions in the comment section or directly DM me on Instagram or LinkedIn. That's it. See you in the next one.